Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham and such. Anyway, yeah, there's a few things going on, a few issues to get to in this video, and still working on technology issues with this Linux thing. I kind of dumped Ubuntu, and yeah, so I'm still playing with Manjaro on this computer, and it's running very well on the other computer, but it's not doing too well on this one. Um, but I'll make videos about that. But yeah, it's just about you got to be really careful when you install it. That there's just nothing to make to mess anything up somewhere, because once it just goes all. You have to have something you can save too, because there's no fixing some of it when it goes bad. But anyway, I'll save that for a discussion. Anyway, it works when it works, sort of. Anyway, so yeah, the subjects. All right. So first, there's Sam Harris and David Benatar had a conversation, and Benatar did better. I mean, he sometimes is a little. Well, he still isn't aggressive enough, but he certainly sounded like the intelligent person in the conversation. And Sam Harris was just being a douche. And you know, I like Sam Harris generally speaking. We say like, well, out of 100 people you pull off the street and you throw Sam Harris in the pile, I'm probably going to pick him as like, to be on my team. So, if we were picking for dodgeball or something, he's probably going to be, he's intelligent, and in most circumstances he can do logic fairly well, and he's articulate, and he's lots of good things. But on this subject, he was just demonstrated that all these intellectuals have these huge personal character flaws when it comes to just recognizing simple facts like all humans are assholes. And we got a bunch of programs running in our head that don't have anything to do with being logical or fair or right or anything good. And clearly he has some of that vanity and ego running around in him, and he just totally allows it to wipe out any kind of intelligence you might offer on the subject. So yeah, he's just a douche. Or dildo. Maybe I'll call him one of those things in the title. Anyway, alright, so in the other news was me and Das Spook had like a 4-hour conversation. Recorded for your pleasure, and we just don't really agree on much in terms of, I'm a materialist and he really isn't. And even beyond that, even if I could get him to stay grounded, I think he'd just still make excuses for the poor performance of the animal organism. But anyway, so a lot of it's redundant conversation about how to gain perspective, or to well, at least we demonstrate we could have a conversation without it degrading into personal shit. And so at least that was a positive step forward. But I don't know if there's any other steps made. But anyway, I held my own, I think. Regardless. Old Fan's been posting and backup channel for the Vox Neruda videos, and so I'll leave a link to that. I mean, he was an amazing character, and in spite of the, well, I don't even know whether the theater of his persona, there's a lot going on in his head. Anyway, so just if you have the guts to go there, it's sort of a acquired taste, but it's once you acquire the taste, But yeah, I do wish he, still around, but he's not. Anyway, yeah, life sucks. It just points out the waste. You go to all the trouble to make somebody into something, just to wipe them out, unceremoniously and with little or no dignity remaining. So I figure I can just play some of these Sam Harris clips, or maybe I'll play some Das Book, some random spots, and so I'll preface that by saying I haven't listened to it all, because I'm taking notes for writing. So I'm going to actually try to do some writing, and I'll probably make a video when I go through those notes. But the main theme was, in the beginning of the conversation, Benatar was basically saying, look, I don't want to have a personal conversation about what I think about life. I want to have like an intelligent conversation about how we as human beings value things. And the fact is, I can point to so many examples, he didn't say it in these words at all, where our hypocrisy and duplicity is obvious. And it uses one of the examples that I use. So there's coincidences aren't just coincidences. So it's in my opinion, it's sort of an affirming statement that this analogy both Benatar and I thought of was, well, just compare it to something that doesn't exist. And so when we look at Mars and we see it empty, or we look at the moon and see it desolate, or we look at Neptune and see nothing living on it, no part of our brain says, oh, I wish there was some giant tentacle monsters there, or that there were giant Martian eating sharks swimming in the Martian oceans or something. There's no sincere or deep, the pain, that no one's there, dancing silly jigs, having square dance night, no one there to do all that fun stuff that we're doing. And clearly, it just points out how this value, whatever it is we're valuing, it doesn't have anything to do with living things in the universe. It really just has to do with us in the universe. And it just becomes obvious. So anyway, so that's a sort of a theme that I think is going to be important, is to just make a ton of comparisons to all the ways in which our hypocrisy would be revealed. Like if I could make a little panel, where, people without being judged or without anybody knowing they did it, they could just erase, races of humans from existence, or let's say ideological philosophies, like just wipe out Islam. They could just hit a button and Islam would go away. Yeah, just go away. It wouldn't exist anymore. No brains would be walking around thinking Muhammad was God and all that kind of crap. People would press the buttons. Just as Sam Harris would certainly press the no Islam button. And the Nazis would have certainly pressed the we don't need Jews. They're just a pain in the ass. People would press these buttons. And I think they're just being duplicitous liars if they say they wouldn't. Because that's how they understand life to be, is that, there's these people that are just obnoxious and, and evil and nasty, just create problems. And so if you just don't make them, you don't have a problem. It's not like you're killing anything. You're just making it go away in some gentle way where nobody even knows it. Nobody knows it existed. You'll never miss it. It's almost like saying, if I could allow you to just hit a button and just get rid of the AIDS virus and polio and smallpox, you're not going to miss them. No one's going to cry because there's no little smallpoxes running around anymore. So anyway, so the point is there's lots of ways to perhaps make that understood, how people's prejudice is just so overwhelming in terms of it's their kids and their dog and their life and their picket fence and their, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the subject of actually needing anything else to exist. And I don't know if I could push people, in terms of saying something. I've sort of implied before. Let's say we had a galactic space mission to, save the human race because the planet Earth was going to get annihilated. We could build one ship and put 10 people on it and send it into space. And we decided to have some worldwide lottery to decide who gets to be the seeds of the human race. And I can just imagine that if just by bad luck or whatever, the 10 random people, none of them are white. I could just imagine that all of a sudden the funding for the project would just dry up, and everybody just kind of lose enthusiasm, for saving the human race, if Whitey doesn't get to go. But anyway, I'm just saying that I think that's the real conversation, in the sense that that's really the only subject here, is that the people's only attachment is this personal one, where they have to feel like they're invested in this future by having kids, or just because of their own imagination and just imagining the other people being enough like them that they're still here somehow. They're still in the game. But I think if you really push them, if I really said, okay, we're going to cut you have to give the world one of your kidneys. We have to cut one of your kidneys out, for the human race to survive or something 1,000 years from now. So 1,000 years from now, there's going to be a critical thing that happens, and if we cut your kidney out now, it'll prevent the very peaceful destruction of the human race. I wonder how many people would say, "Oh, I must do it," because those poor people won't be able to not going to save anybody from any harm. So just get it. You're not going to save them from getting killed and being afraid and seeing it happen. You're just going to make it possible for humans to exist some more. Nothing else. No saved or spared harms. Well, anyway, I'm just saying all those scenarios, those kinds of analogies are thought experiments even. Both ones connected to real things and, imaginary things. That's the real argument. Because when you do that, when you start thinking in those terms, I think, it becomes even more obvious how this really is just about you thinking in terms of, it's your game. It's like you're playing a video game and it's your game somehow. And if somebody else is playing it, I don't think you'd be that damn interested. And I certainly don't think you'd invest much to play the game if you didn't play the game. I don't think you'd be willing to put too many quarters in the machine if you're not the one playing the game. That kind of thing. Or in some way thinking you're playing the game. Probably said more words than necessary there. But, no. Nothing new there. So, let's play some of this and see how it goes.
Be more sympathetic to my views. And one very common kind of response I've received is from people who've had these sorts of thoughts and felt that they were entirely alone in the world. They thought...
Right, they're just starting to get into the conversation. So yeah, I get that a lot too. But unfortunately, our mission really isn't just to, create a little, whatever, tea party thing and lament our bad luck, of being on the planet in the first place, and then in the second place, realizing we're in a shithole. But anyway, you have to do more than that. We have to stop it. So it does remind me of the fourth thing, maybe, is the Steel Air girl. She made a video about religion, and she was another one of these people who somehow is uncomfortable calling themselves atheist, even though she's an atheist now. And she was very religious, apparently, in the past, which seems weird, but she just seems too smart to be that, to have been that stupid. Eesh. And but yeah, she just wasn't. She doesn't really see it. I don't. Doesn't really recognize that religion is a huge problem. 9 out of 10 kids are born into it. I mean, even if you could get people to be atheists, you could probably, annihilate the human race, just because I would think if you took all the atheists and put them in a statistical pile, they probably don't have collectively enough kids to maintain human existence. It's only the dumbass religious fucks who are still caught up in this idiotic routine of just make babies for the purpose of making babies. God says so, idiotic stuff, But anyway. Okay, jump ahead a little bit.
Would email me periodically who was suicidal, and he had been suicidal for quite some time.
Yeah, so Sam Harris, of course, turns into some sort of personal story, some little personal thing where he has to talk about some guy who was suicidal, and as if this bigger subject has something to do with somebody's, personal lack of interest, based on personal circumstances, where the guy was in pain or in some other circumstance. He doesn't elaborate on the guy's condition and why he might have legitimate reasons to commit suicide. So anyway, I thought that was very lame. So jumping ahead.
Is in as part of the good. You're saying that the prevention of harm is a positive good, even though there is no one who enjoys this absence of harm. Is that where you're kind of putting the rabbit in the hat?
Well, so he thinks it's a fake thing when you prevent something, if the prevention, okay, is how do you even say it? It's obviously if you stop something from happening, it's not apparent that it would have happened. So so the person enjoying the benefit of it doesn't have the bad thing to compare it to. He doesn't get blown up by the nuclear bomb, then he doesn't know what it's like to get blown up by the nuclear bomb. The bad experience isn't real then, because the prevention doesn't look real because there's no evidence of the prevention. But to argue that prevention doesn't matter or have value in and of itself, intrinsically, it's always good to prevent something bad that would have happened. Now, there's always these catches where a bad thing is connected to some, preventing a bigger bad. Let's say there's a bad thing, and if you prevent that bad thing, a worse thing happens because you prevented that bad thing. Clearly, that changes the equation, but only in the pragmatic sense that obviously you have to be able to separate things in and of themselves. Clearly, I would argue that yes, it's okay to have a bad thing if the bad thing prevents a worse thing. Certainly, that's logical. But that doesn't change the fact that if it didn't cause a worse thing, the bad thing in and of itself is still bad. I mean, torturing one person to save 1,000 people from torture doesn't, that fact that bad has a good, okay, doesn't change the fact that that's still one person being tortured is still bad in and of itself. And you can't see, people don't even understand that, making those distinctions. So when you say something is intrinsically bad, it's intrinsically bad. So the idea of preventing something that's intrinsically bad has to always be a good. There's no way around it not being good to prevent unnecessary bad. But the idea of preventing unnecessary good, that can't be a bad. Preventing an unnecessary good, because the only necessary goods are obviously the goods that get rid of a bad. But I mean, yeah, that's the asymmetry. So there's so many ways to explain the asymmetry. The goods aren't made of the same stuff as the bads. Most of the goods are made of fixing a bad. Most of the goods are made of fixing a bad. I'd say all of them, but whatever. Alright, jump ahead a little.
Away from those, to think of the application of the asymmetry to other cases and see how it works.
There you go. So he's just saying, think of the asymmetry in other cases, and then you won't be a hypocrite, because there's so every time you think about it in some realistic way in the real world, you can do the right math and understand that it doesn't make any sense. And we know that every life has liability, and it imposes risk, and it does it merely for a notion in people's heads. There's no actual factual, detailed way you can say the universe needs to have life in it. If life doesn't exist, the universe is degraded in some way. There's no way you can make an argument for that except in the mind of a human being, because there will be no sadness or lament or moaning or crying, just like there's no rational tears shed for the non-existent Martians. Because it isn't a lesser condition. It isn't you haven't lost anything. Because the only way you really lose is harm. Harm is losing. Being unharmed is, you can't possibly lose in an unharmed state. You can't possibly lose if you're in an unharmed state. It can't be considered a losing position.
Life than bad, then your life may indeed be worth continuing. I say may indeed because there's some complexities there that we could revisit later.
Right, so that's always the problem here, is you can just, weed through more deeper and deeper convolutions of the entanglements between these different things. It's like being a vegetarian, and you could argue, well, I won't use that example because you really can't make those arguments rationally, in terms of more wheat is fed to animals than is fed to humans. More corn is fed to animals than is fed to humans. So it's like raising crops kills animals, but it kills far less than raising animals, obviously. But anyway, yeah. So it can all get people can make it complicated, but the fundamental argument that most of what we're doing is attempting to preserve a state, not obtain a state.
But I think the bar for starting a life is going to be much higher.
Let's stick with the starting of life, because we'll get on to whether life is worth continuing.
Yeah, I don't see why the subject would even be anything to do with whether life is worth continuing, because that's not really his book. But regardless, I mean, I don't know what's in his new book, but I don't think he was wasting his time talking about that. So even the way Sam Harris titled this video, "Is Life Actually Worth Living?" is kind of stupid. Life, under the current circumstances, life is worth living only in the sense, as a minimum, just to fight evil. Just because there's so much evil, there's so many people doing horrible, obnoxious, terrible impositions of harm, preventing harm. There's so much harm to be prevented that it's worth living, even if you're miserable, just because you might be able to prevent some of that harm from happening in the future. So the question is moot. If there would be a real question if we lived in some world where there wasn't some urgent need to rescue victims. If there weren't billions of victims, then especially, and then you look at the animal kingdom and you're talking trillions of victims. If in need of a Superman, in need of a rescue, they need somebody to help them, to acknowledge their dilemma and do something about it. So, and is it realistic that we're ever going to live in a world that isn't in need of being fixed? So in a sense, life is always worth living once you're alive, because then you can fix it.
Let's just say that we lived in a world where, at birth, every human being could expect to have a slightly better than even chance. I mean,
so this is his. He did this when he did his moral landscape book, and the biggest flaw in it to me was the word thrive. So he converted good into a word like thrive, like that has some definition. when it has no definition. Because, thriving for Quakers is, a lot of this animal husbandry crap. Abusing animals. Thriving isn't a good enough definition of a good life. You have to do more than be personally comfortable to call your life valuable or good. You have to actually be productive in some way, in the sense that you did eliminate more harm than you caused, and you saved more bugs from a horrible life by stepping on them, let's say, than you harmed something by stopping it from preventing a harm. It's like it's so hard to calculate our lives in terms of what is actually good and what is bad. You could run somebody over on the street and he could have been a serial pedophile, and you did the world a huge favor. That kind of, unfortunately, deserve doesn't have much to do with the world we live in, and so it's really hard to know with any certainty that even when you're shooting Hitler, whether you're doing the right thing. Because there might be a bigger Hitler was preventing.
Basically, they're like the
Okay, well, I'm fishing.
in a casino playing blackjack, right? They have whatever it is, a 52% chance of winning.
Right, okay, so this whole idea that Sam Harris thinks that people win on this planet. He thinks that our lives are not, on balance, brutal consumption. That we don't, with almost deliberate blindness, don't just turn our eye from all the crap all the bad shit we cause, and much of it accidentally, but some of it through our pursuit of our happiness. People give each other venereal diseases, all kinds of stuff we do to each other because of our selfish impulse. I'm sure Sam Harris lives a fairly comfortable life, and I'm sure he takes better care of his 2 kids, which he has, I found out in here, than, most of the kids on planet Earth. And he has some rational reason how he figures out that his 2 kids somehow earned it, where those kids in the rest of the world didn't. Some rationalization he has to say it's okay. He's not doing any harm. He's winning. He thinks he's a winner. He thinks that's winning. And I would argue, no, you're too much of a coward to look in the mirror and see the real Tyrannosaurus that you are, pussy. All right, moving on.
Is it a pity that there's not some additional being here that's not enjoying Eden? No, I don't think there's anything bad about that. And I think there's an indifference.
All right, so there's another example where you could just say, well, the world could have, let's say we could figure out how many we could feed. You could go, well, we could have 39 billion people on planet Earth and still do this, that, and the other thing and not have a entirely horrible life. And, let's just imagine every sperm and egg, is a potential human being. Are we supposed to grieve or say, or truly rationally say the universe is somehow diminished because every one of those eggs didn't get fertilized? Somehow it's huge deprivation to the universe not to have zillions of humans, living out these stupid little square dance lives. Sam Harris wouldn't live 9 out of 10 people's lives, I'm quite sure. If he was sitting in his nice, comfortable home, and the point was given to him, well, your time's up here. You can go be one of them, or you can just go to, take a longer nap. I don't think he's going to go jump into any of those suits. I don't think he wants to walk in their skin. And he talks like, oh yeah, half the people on Earth are winning somehow. 50-50 odds. Yeah, horse shit.
Come into existence is not bad. It's not bad because it's not deprived. Whereas your existing child will be deprived of this benefit you could have given.
Another point of confusion for me,
Yeah, well, this whole idea, like I said, he thinks, I guess, that he somehow has a plan where he knows on balance, is that's how these people think. That the little horrors that are little murders that are going to take place in his daughter's lives or whatever, um, somehow will be worth it. He has some kind of confidence, and it's confidence built out of what? All of the Hollywood success stories. Well, where do you look into the world and say, oh yeah, that life turned out so great? Because all of them crash and burn. And many in really dismal circumstances. I mean, really bad crashes and burns. So what the fuck is he thinking? I mean, really, it's just horseshit. He's not thinking. See, that's the whole point. He just won't admit, yeah, I'm a vain, selfish asshole, and I decided, the chick was hot and she wanted kids. Maybe that's it. I don't know what it is. I was just saying he's way too intelligent to be the guy who initiated the project. Maybe he thought he had to do it for his heritage, his people, some kind of bullshit like that. But it was bullshit. There wasn't anything logical in the decision. And why doesn't he just start the conversation and say, hey, David, this is an interesting conversation because, I had a couple of kids and I didn't do it for a goddamn good reason. I did it for a bunch of selfish, personal bullshit reasons. Here it is, the most important thing in the world, and I didn't take the decision seriously at all. Because I'm a douche.
Here is that you acknowledge a spectrum of experience ranging from the very, very positive to the very, very negative. But when you take the 0 point of non-existence, you say that we should be indifferent between 0 and the very, very positive. Whereas we should...
Okay, so again, this idea that the very, very positive is somehow very, very positive relative to absolutely no harm. So you're in no jeopardy, you will have absolutely no negative experiences whatsoever, and he thinks that the positives are positive relative to that perfect state where you don't have any liabilities, when we know that all of the positive states cannot possibly be achieved without the expectation of some, and for most cases, a substantial amount of very bad times, very bad moments, your cancer diagnosis and all the other crap that's coming. Those are going to be very bad times. Now, you think you already had some bad times. Truth is, you probably haven't even touched, whatever, Skid Row. You haven't even come close to it yet. And so this idea that the 0 state, that these positives still exist when they're not always in comparison to the negatives. And that's how human beings function. They compare one broken leg to 2 broken legs. This is what they do. Psychotically, and this is where they contrive this notion of this good, is because they think they'll need it still. They think food needs to keep being made because they think there's still something hungry that needs to eat it. Some kind of crap like that. But it's crap. It's psychobabble bullshit.
Out that picture of existence scientifically, but the core of the ethical view there and the soteriological view, the view of what it means to be free, is that existence has this intrinsically unsatisfying character. And this is for reasons that we really haven't gone into yet. It's just the fact that everything is impermanent. Your pleasures, no matter how good, always fall away, and you're left with more of a search for pleasure. There's a kind of an intrinsic dissatisfaction, even in satisfaction.
Oh yes, the moment after it. That's right, the moment after. Yeah, it only takes like a week after people win the lottery. They're already depressed and fucking everything up. And the fact is once you've had it too, once you gain control of your game, and you get the trophy wife, and you gain these controls, losing any of it is even more painful. Then going backwards is so much more painful than striving going forward. Losing what you got is, really bad than not having it at all. Better to have loved and lost. No. Better to have never loved at all. Realistically.
Describe. But that's a separate view from the asymmetry that I've been presenting. So you can have the asymmetry that I presented earlier, and then you can either couple that with the view I'm offering now about ceasing to exist, or you needn't couple it with that.
That's precisely the point. I don't see how you can keep them apart. If existence had...
Yes, well, the same thing I'd say to Sam Harris in the sense, this now just becomes a question of, see, now they're just going to talk about your depression or something. And clearly that's going to be a consequence. So that's almost the irony of where Sam Harris brought up his depressed friend, because you're almost arguing, well, anybody who takes any responsibility for what goes on planet Earth and what has happened on planet Earth, if they're not depressed. I mean, Sam Harris saw Donald Trump get elected President of the United States. That doesn't depress him? I think it does. And there's so much of the fact of just recognizing the carnage, just thinking, once you accept that animals have a sensate brain and can feel pain and experience life much like we do, except doing math. They don't do the intelligence parts, but they do the emotional parts, the loss parts, the fear parts. You should be damn fucking depressed. I mean, depression should be something you have to fight against, because it's inevitable. And then they blame the depression for the bad attitude. I mean, it's just it's so idiotic. It's like you could watch you could have a tsunami come in, as happened in the real world. Wash your daughter's hand, right out of your hand. Just her hand slips right out. You can watch that happen. You can live through an experience like that. And then some asshole is going to say, your depression is giving you a bad attitude. No, life is giving them a bad attitude. Fuck.
Has the character that you say that it has, and I would grant you you're on very firm ground thinking that pains are worse than pleasures and that there are more of them, and we can talk about that. But if it...
well, see, he says you're on very firm ground, except before he was making exactly the opposite argument, wherein somehow you can derive your pleasures without either eventually paying personal prices or imposing huge prices on other people for your comfort. You can live well on their back.
It really is bad to be brought into the world, and not just a little bad, it's really, really bad, then I don't see how that doesn't extend to the moral character of waking up the next day. And if I can give you a situation where there are no ancillary harms accrued by somebody dying, and implicit in everything you're saying about existence.
But the ancillary harm in somebody dying is that you have to assume that they were completely incapable of doing anything, even casting a vote or anything that could ever mean anything in the cause of preventing future harms. And that's just unrealistic. And it's certainly unrealistic for anybody to think they're incapable of having an influence. So to prejudge your life and say, I won't change anything, I can't change anything, I'm completely meaningless in this fight. If all the soldiers do that, if all the soldiers say, look, I got rotten feet, I'm tired, I'm sick, I can't really do this, I won't make a contribution, I'm going home. If they all do that, the war doesn't get won.
Is the claim that all of these canceled goods of future people don't mean anything, right? I mean, there's no moral weight to place on all the good things that could have happened had humanity continued, because these are hypothetical goods that accrue to no one. How is it that...
See, that whole a good accruing to somebody is just kind of a silly thing. It's the only thing that can really accrue to somebody is the prevention of a harm. You can't deny somebody a pleasure they don't need. You just can't.
Having everyone die painlessly in their sleep wouldn't be, on your account, a good thing, and in fact, perhaps the best possible thing we could imagine having happen. Like if you could do it, if you could push that button, you would be a moral hero of a sort that has never existed.
Yes, that's so. At least he's got that part right. That's right. I'd put all you whack jobs, all you silly people who just keep perpetuating, forcing somebody to press a button in the first place. You know, we shouldn't have to press a button. At least to finish the human part of this equation. I mean, obviously the animal part, they can't voluntarily do the right thing because they don't have the intelligence to be ethical. But that's the whole point. These people are supposed to be intelligent. Sam Harris thinks himself an intellectual, and all he is a, he's just stroking the pleasure points of idiocracy and just this dumbass notion of some comforting notion that human beings are doing something better than square dancing, badly, expensively.
So when I say that we've got an interest in not ceasing to exist, you think that I mean that the interest consists in either my sense of foreboding or in the bereavement that my relatives will have, and that's not what I mean.
Well, no, I'm just saying those are powerful confounding factors.
They are, and I'm happy to set those aside. I agree with you, we should set those aside.
What I'm saying additionally, David, is that your only conceivable interest in continuing to exist has to contain that life on balance is worth living, right? It has to contain some judgment about the character of life.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. That's just silly. That's like saying somebody stays in the war because they like war. They must like war or they wouldn't stay there fighting the war. No, they could just possibly understand that if they don't do it, then some other kid has to take his place. It says there's no winning. So, yeah, he's going to do his job. So, yeah, not very smart, Sam.
With the antinatalist position in the right circumstances, because what's motivating the antinatalist position is this judgment about the character of existence. And the judgment runs far deeper than I realized. I mean, now I realize on the basis of this conversation with you that there is no way to make existence good enough such that it is any better than non-existing.
Well, what's it made out of? Again, it's just made out of killing things. That's the whole record of evolution is kill, 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 destroy, destroy, destroy. And consume in between by addictive compulsions that are imposed on you in a manner that's incredibly parasitic. Yes, you're a parasite, Sam, like a tick. You're not going to be missed.
Which is not an intuition, obviously, that most people would share. There's no way to tune the dials of positive existence so as to make it better than zero. And it is much.
Well, I guess, would you want somebody tuning those dials? So again, I mean, he has this perception that he has a right to turn these dials and tell other people what suffering is worth it. So we know that every life form is hugely expensive in terms of the life that is the biosphere that creates your oxygen, creates the environment you exist in, the ability to exist in an environment. And all of that is made out of a ton of non-voluntary, non-consensual victims. And he thinks he can just, yeah, I can do that. I can dial up these dials and tell them what's worth it. While he lives comfortably. While he thrives personally. Why he doesn't sit in the trench and eat shit.
Much, much worse than zero, generally speaking, and for, any world we can find plausible.
So again, I think that you could hold that view, and if you do hold that view about death, then you could hold it alongside the antinatalist position, but I don't think you have to. And the reason
David,
why I don't think you...
Let me just interject one thing here. The badness of dying, again, separate from all of the ancillary pain and suffering around death, but just the badness of having, let's say, in this case, your goals.
So this is like the straw man kind of argument. Like somehow, if you believe life is shit, you have to kill yourself immediately. And it's just, it's just bullshit as an argument, even if just because people psychologically have difficulty dealing with their own mortality and destruction, and just the idea of the physical threat of it. Somebody can tell you they have a syringe. Oh, it'll be just fine. But we all know it might not be just fine. I might go into convulsions. Something horrible might happen to me physically. There's always something to be afraid of. And, this whole attitude that somehow that fear is unreasonable when we see it happen. We see people in the electric chair where it takes them a half an hour to finally stop the guy's heart from beating. I mean, those cases are real cases, for fuck's sake.
Canceled, even though you no longer exist to have found them canceled. Think of how much weight you need to have on that side of the balance so as to cancel the goodness of no longer being subjected to the misery and the risk of even greater misery imposed on everyone by merely existing.
Yeah, I realize that. And if you ask me if there's one area where I have the greatest doubts...
So here would be another argument about, where a selfish indulgence is appropriate and where it's inappropriate. So here we have one selfish indulgence, which is, I want a baby, or I want my namesakes, and I want a little copy of me, and my ego needs to be fed. And then we have the other psychological crap of, I'm afraid to die. And Sam Harris is saying those two are the same. Somehow this compulsion to impose on something else, have them satisfy you in some way, is the same as your relationship to death, which has nothing to do with imposing on somebody else, which doesn't have to be made out of somebody else's harm. No, these two things are nothing like each other. One is frivolous, taking, and the other one is a fundamental, naturally created apprehension. So it's like comparing a taste for green jelly beans to a heroin addiction. Come on. He's comparing his fucking taking of the green jelly beans and building houses out of them for himself as comparable to, I couldn't help it. It's as strong as the heroin addiction. No, you could have helped it. Fucking idiot.
I take that question seriously. That would be on your account, and really, I think any account, a terrible thing to do, to build minds that perhaps are even far more sensitive to suffering than our own, and build them to suffer in ways that perhaps we can't imagine. And this would
yes. Well, you're just assuming, Sam, that we haven't. The nature hasn't already done that. People think. I made the argument, but animal organisms probably feel more intensely than we do. Their bads are worse than ours, and their goods are probably better than ours, because ours have been dulled, our senses have been compromised to do this intellectual crap, to do this multiplication in our head shit. That's why we don't have a great sense of smell. It's probably because that was one of the things sacrificed to be intellectual. So, he probably hasn't even considered that being a possibility, that suffering might not be tied to your big-brained intelligence shit, that suffering might be something even the dumb animals do quite well.
This would be a bad thing whether or not we know we have done this. The worst case is we could do this in a way that we never find out we've done this, and we've just created hells and populated them in our computers. So we live in what I call a moral landscape that has peaks and valleys, and we are just kind of edging.
He did that a couple of times, I guess, in this, because he did in the part I heard, brought up his moral landscape. And again, his moral landscape apparently finds justification for these impositions, for deciding for somebody else what is worth it. And he calls that something acceptable in his moral landscape. I don't see how that could possibly ever be acceptable in any ethical landscape, that you draw straws and stick them in other people's pockets. How can that ever be defended as something a reasonable person does? Cunt.
Is so reliably bad that having children, even in a circumstance where you can be pretty confident that you'll assure them what's considered a very good human life in our context, right? You're not giving birth.
Right, so you can assure it, and you can assure their death will be pleasant and wonderful. And yes, I mean, it's just an amazing crock of shit. Let's go find how many Hollywood people had secret autistic kids or something. Yes, they're guaranteed. They're all guaranteed. It never goes wrong, the experiment of life creation. That was pitiful. Fucking asshole. Anyway, I figure we'll play a couple of little Das Spook clips and get the hell out of here, so to speak. Alright, so we'll jump to this point. Let's just hit a point, then we'll go there.
Arguments resting on the first claim of imposition and then the agony into death. And I said in the opposite, the people that say, oh, antinatalism is counterintuitive to the organism, reproductive, yada yada. And I said,
yeah. See, that argument's important though. So don't.
So as he just keeps going. There's so many people that do this. They just justify nature. They just say that because nature has an agenda, we have to have that agenda. Because nature values replication, we have to replicate. Because women have uteruses, they have to use them. Because men have sperm, they have to allow it to swim. It's just. I'm sorry. There's no rational grounding for this assumption that nature has any idea what it's doing, let alone a good idea of what it's doing.
And they're fucking interpreting into Japanese, and they can't figure out what I'm saying, that somehow I'm responsible, because when I say go out in the world and fix things, they heard go fucking jump in front of a car. Well, I can't fix that, okay? Fuck that. I'm not going to waste my time trying to...
So this was sort of the theme that Das Spook wanted to talk about, was the idea that we have a responsibility to each other, because what we say depresses each other and fucks with people's heads, and they get all ideas. And so I was sort of just pointing out that I would like to be able to do that. I'd like to be harmless. And I'd like to be able to have the time to calculate every word I use, to be just so careful. But I don't think it's possible in the first place. And I just don't have the time. And you just can't. For most of these people, they're like Son of Sams. If you don't talk to them, if they don't interpret you as in some crazy way, they'll just talk to their dog and come up with a crazy theory anyway. They're going to find they're going to express their insanity, whether you like it or not, so to speak. Whether it's me, they do something stupid in the name of, or they do it in some other way. The people who killed John Lennon or something, those people they're whacked. And if I don't whack them, if I'm not the tool of their craziness, they'll find another tool. So it just doesn't matter really. The runaway trains, and yes, sometimes you can clear the road and make a place for the train to go, but I don't have a responsibility to compromise everything I'm about or who I am because other people have make trains run away. I didn't make the runaway trains. Well, please, thank you.
We moved into computer atmospheres, right? Like, there's classes on you must post this blog with these attributes of your classes, like these things that are making their engagement with the internet not only mandatory, but then how their form fit in culture, some of them disparate, some of them wild, some of them out of whack, some of them in different states and different countries and different...
Right, so he does wax, so sometimes I don't know where the hell he's going actually, but whatever, fine. He went there. I don't think I knew what the hell he was talking about, but I think I responded in some sort of somewhat coherent way with some kind of somewhat blah blah blah.
Fucking bullshit of compromise and pragmatism.
Well, no, but hang on. I also wanted to show you this, right? Because this would be really dumbed down, but some reason, like it's, here, let me cover that part, right? Like this is, okay, like this is kind of a dumbed down painting, I think.
Yes, it's pretty horrible. Compared to your, I mean, it's just almost like, no, I wouldn't even show that. It's so bad. But anyway, so we were just talking about, this idea of compromise and how we compromise the most valuable things, then things should be cherished and blah, 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 because we can't do anything in this world that has integrity and it's never appreciated. And, so I was just comparing it to the idea of art and stuff, and that you wouldn't want to sacrifice your own, you wouldn't want to have to be reduced to just being a performer where you never got to act in the play you felt was yours, where you never got to, it's like being a dancer and you never get to dance to your favorite song or something. It's just dismal fact of life, the dirty, stinking, ugly, crappy world we live in.
Cinematographic production, and one of the people is into character attributions and cinematography and art forms and aesthetic, and I didn't know to what extent you take a non-straight line approach to accepting the weirdism instead of trying to dissect like the rudimentary function and the disliking or the...
Well, I certainly can't help to see plot flaws. Some plot flaws are just so egregious that you just can't.
All right, so I guess we were talking a little bit about movies and, fantasy in a sense, and being able to enjoy certain human indulgences. And there's a point where, you can't do it anymore. Like even, you could sit in a park, but if once you... let's say you have a hard case of knowledge of evolution, then you might see the tree, and the tree might look like the evolution tree, and you might see the blood dripping off of it in your head, and you might see all the dead animals, and the 10 baby this, and the 20 baby that, and the 40 baby that. They're all horribly, brutally, murdered. For every one living thing you see, there's a bunch of dead ones. It's all his dead brother and sisters that were killed in horrible ways. So then you don't enjoy sitting in the park anymore. That kind of thing.
Like if people are in agreement, like you belong to this said group of family, right? You don't go against your family. Meaning they may do shit you don't like and you may move away from them, but when you're speaking to anyone on the outside, you don't defame them, you don't accent what it is that person did wrongly as kind of a code of conduct. And so by that same virtue, I think people use that as we're inclusive, we're going to grieve, but we're going to be blind, we know the horror, but we're not going to speak about it, like speak no evil, and then just continue on your way.
Yeah.
Well, we dig into conversations about how there's so much hypocrisy in values. So it was sort of like the entire conversation in that sense about throwing flowers to the 9/11 victims, give their families $10 billion. I mean, $1 billion each or whatever it was, and all the people killed by a drunk driver that week, those families got nothing. Tough shit. Yeah, life's hard. Life's unfair. Deserve has nothing to do with it. That's all they got. So, die spectacularly. You earn $1 billion. Don't die spectacularly enough. Your family's gonna live on the street, sell their house.
Well, I'm just saying that the appeal of rationalizations and justifications is the whole thing why religion has been durable, and I'm saying those are all bad reasons, not good reasons. So they're all cheats of the truth and all compromises against the truth, and they're made quite aggressively. So I don't have anything to say to that except that's just part of the is part of the vice of humanity, part of their crime against the truth, crime against their own dignity, crime against their own intelligence. I mean, it's a crime against your intelligence to think a god made it. It's a crime against the very capacity to think, to make up these fake narratives of superior function when you have such inferior, the evidence of your inferior
Very good.
ones. We've imposed a truth on it that is not the truth. We've imposed a perception and an evaluation that has nothing to do with what it actually is. And we've done exactly the same with our own lives.
Right. I was just thinking, like, when I take supplements or I exercise and I notice that my metabolism or my libido peaks up, or I go through some sort of cleaning process and flossing or some sort of like irrigational thing, my approach to my world shifts dramatically, because maybe I am more horny here when if I didn't exercise.
So mood, that we should be living in our moods, and again, that's just so anti-intelligent that we should accept that our fundamental belief system is dependent on mood. I mean, we should hope to be able to argue better than that.
That early experience, like I said, Louisiana was a really, there was so much life there that's thrown away casually all the time, that I became so aware of mortality and the price paid, and so because they're all pets to me, you know what I mean.
So I'm just using an example of growing up in a place where there's lots of bugs and animals and lots of bio whatever it is, the circle of life shit is happening every 10 seconds, in warm climates. There's all kinds of circle of life shit going on all over the fucking place. Billions of lives created and destroyed in the same day kind of thing. And it just, frankly, made it quite clear to me that this ain't a game I volunteered for. Why the hell would I want to play this? Get ground up and squished game. Fuck that.
Find commonalities with this notion that no matter how much I nod my head in agreement and try to get to this idea of a consensus truth with somebody, there's always going to be something that comes about that says, nah, I'm just not there, I'm not on the same page.
Yeah, well, part of the problem, though, I think, is that if we went back to the elephant metaphor, you don't think the elephant's an elephant. You think it is a shapeshifter. The elephant can be these.
Yeah, okay, so it's just kind of about having this conversation about, where you establish some sort of premises about how we're going to function in terms of trying to find an angle to look at everything. And you have to kind of do that by process, in the sense you have to agree on a few things and start stepping the same way, and so we can both walk around the elephant at the same time, and then maybe we have some hope of agreeing on what the fuck the animal is. But it's not going to happen if we're looking at the different parts at different times and then conversating about what we're seeing at those times. That won't work. We sort of have to force ourselves to find the same perspectives, looking at the same part and from a similar point of view as we move, or it ain't going to work very well. So anyway, it's probably enough of a video. Hopefully the software didn't fuck up, because this version of Manjaro is unstable currently. So I'll have to see if I can get it to work a little better. I might have to start over, because I think something went wrong with its swap file or some other kind of bullshit. But anyway, just being a little bit of an irritant. So till the next time and such.